You're gonna want to see this dog's mouth. I've never seen anything like it." I said it without thinking, but the second the words left my lips, I knew I wasn't being dramatic. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong, but not in the way you might think. I was standing in exam room 2 of Oak Ridge Animal Clinic in a pair of scrubs that smelled faintly like disinfectant and peanut butter, staring at the stray German shepherd curled in the corner. The dog had refused water. That's what started it all. Not a sip, not a lick. When I tried coaxing her with a shallow dish, she recoiled like I'd offered poison, even when I added ice cubes, which usually makes the pups go wild. She didn't budge. That's when I knew this wasn't just another routine rescue. Dr. Carter, who had been flipping through patient charts outside, stepped in. He was in his 60s, retired once already, but came back because, as he liked to say, a quiet life makes me twitchy. He'd seen everything in his decades of veterinary work. But when he crouched down and gently opened that dog's mouth, I watched the color drain from his face. He didn't say anything for a good 5 seconds, just stared. Then he looked at me, blinking like someone who'd been shaken awake. "Get the camera," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands trembled as he held the dog's jaw, eyes fixed on something inside that seemed to have stolen his voice, his composure, and his certainty all at once. And in that moment I knew we'd stumbled into something much bigger than a stray dog that wouldn't drink water. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. I need to write approximately 400 words for this section, covering the background and main characters. My name's Josh Sullivan. I'm a vet tech at Oak Ridge, a small clinic tucked between a bakery and a feed store in rural Tennessee. We get all kinds: lost pets, barn cats with attitude problems, the occasional raccoon someone tries to pass off as a weird-looking dog. But this dog, this stray German shepherd, was different. From the moment animal control dropped her off, something about her unsettled me. She wasn't aggressive or scared, just quiet, like she was watching everything but didn't want to be seen. The officer who found her, Rick Bannister, said she was sitting in the middle of a dried-up field not far from the old Miller farmhouse that burned down last winter. No collar, no microchip, no tags, just a thick coat full of burrs and a gaze that made you feel like you were the one being evaluated. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She just followed when led, sat when told, and flinched at the sound of running water. We named her Abby, short for abandoned. Not the most creative, I know, but it felt right. Dr. Carter is what you'd call old school. White coat, no-nonsense attitude, hands that could calm the most frantic animal with a single touch. But he cared, more than most. That's why he came back after retiring. Animals need someone who remembers what it was like before everything became about the bottom line, he'd say. He'd been my mentor since I dropped out of vet school 3 years ago, a decision that still hung between me and my family like an unspoken accusation. Sarah Mitchell worked the front desk, smart, quick-witted, and completely immune to my occasional attempts at charm. She'd been at Oak Ridge longer than me, knew every client by name, and could calm an anxious pet parent better than any of us. When I carried Abby in that first day, Sarah was the one who made up a kennel with extra blankets without being asked. My brother Ethan and I haven't spoken in years, not since our father's funeral when words were said that couldn't be taken back. But Ethan had connections in places I didn't, working for a nonprofit that investigated animal abuse cases. I never thought I'd need to call on him again. But I also never thought I'd find what we did in Abby's mouth. The town around us was small, the kind where everybody knows everybody's business before they know it themselves. That would come to matter more than I could have imagined. After the mouth inspection, Dr. Carter pulled me aside. "There's something embedded in her upper palate," he whispered, clearly shaken. "But it's not natural. It looks metallic, like a chip or a shard. We'll need imaging." We moved her to the back room where the X-ray machine lived. I held her steady, feeling the tremble in her body. She didn't fight, not once. I don't know what was more unsettling, her obedience or her silence. Dr. Carter developed the images while I prepped a crate for Abby to rest in afterward. I layered it with soft blankets and a bit of shredded newspaper, still thinking about how she wouldn't drink. Most dogs come in half dehydrated and lap up water like it's the best thing they've tasted, but Abby just stared at it like it was a bad memory. 10 minutes later, Dr. Carter called me over. He had the x-ray spread across the light board. His finger pointed at something lodged in the roof of her mouth. It was small, oval-shaped, but it had the telltale glint of something artificial. "That's not an injury," he murmured. "That's been placed, like someone put it there." He nodded slowly. "It's not bone, not dental. That's man-made. Looks like a tag or maybe a tracker." I felt a chill creep up my neck. Who puts a tracker in a dog's mouth? "I don't know," Dr. Carter replied. "But we're going to find out." We scheduled surgery for the next morning. I stayed late, sleeping in the back office with one eye open and my ears tuned to every shift and creak in the building. Abby didn't make a sound all night. By sunrise, I was brewing strong coffee and checking vitals. Her temperature was normal, heartbeat steady, still refused water. Dr. Carter came in with his surgical kit already unpacked. "Let's keep it simple," he said. "We extract the object, stitch the tissue, and monitor for infection. No risks." The surgery itself was quick. A clean incision, minimal bleeding. What he pulled out left us speechless. It was a chip, all right, but not like any I'd seen in my 5 years in animal care. It wasn't shaped like a pet tracker, nor was it labeled. Just a smooth gray disc the size of a fingernail. "I don't like this," Dr. Carter muttered, placing it carefully in a specimen container. After the extraction, Abby drank for the first time. Just a little at first, then more. It was like something had been lifted. Her eyes softened. She even gave my hand a small lick. "She's changing," I said. Dr. Carter nodded. "Or maybe she's coming back." Over the next few days, we ran tests on the chip, sent images to a few university contacts, but no one recognized it. Dr. Carter eventually locked it in a cabinet and focused on Abby's recovery. She gained weight, started wagging her tail when I walked in. Still didn't bark, but there was something peaceful about her silence now. People started coming in just to see her. Word had spread that we'd found a mystery dog. Even kids from the high school dropped by after class. Abby seemed to enjoy the attention, sitting by the front desk like she owned the place. Then came the day that changed everything. A man walked in, mid-40s, wearing jeans too clean for someone who claimed to be a rancher. Said he was looking for a lost dog. When I asked him to describe her, he rattled off details that were too precise, down to the scar on her back leg. But something was off. He never looked at Abby directly. When she saw him, she didn't wag her tail. She stiffened. "She yours?" I asked. The man smiled thinly. "She was part of a project. Belonged to my brother." Dr. Carter came out from the back, wiping his hands. "Project?" The man glanced at the locked cabinet like he knew. "I'll take her now." "Not without proof of ownership," I said, heart pounding. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. But I didn't care what it said. Abby was pressed against my leg, shaking. Dr. Carter stepped between us. "You'll need to leave." The man's smile faded. He tucked the paper away and turned without a word. As he walked out, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. His boots were clean, but the soles were stained with red clay. The kind you only find near the burned Miller farmhouse. Abby didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. We installed new locks the next morning. Something told me this wasn't over. Carter didn't speak for a long time after the man left. He just stood by the window, watching the empty parking lot like he expected that dusty white pickup to roll back in at any moment. Abby stayed close to me. Her body pressed so tight against my leg I could feel her ribs expand with every breath. She was watching the door, too, ears low, eyes darting. "He's not coming back today," I finally said, trying to convince both of us. Tucker didn't look at me. That man wasn't here for a dog. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. Later that day I stayed after closing to sweep the lobby, but my mind kept going back to the way Abby had reacted to him. There was something deeper than fear there. Something like recognition and rejection tangled together. Whatever that man had done, wherever she'd come from, she didn't want to go back. That night I kept thinking of Ranger, the German shepherd I had growing up. The way he'd vanished one day when I was 15, how my father insisted he must have run off, but I knew better. Ranger never wandered. He was always by my side, my shadow, my best friend. His disappearance was one of the reasons I'd wanted to work with animals, to go to vet school, before I dropped out, before I disappointed everyone. I called Sarah after midnight, asking if she could cover my morning shift. "I need to take Abby home with me tonight," I explained. "Just don't feel right leaving her at the clinic." "Does this have to do with that creepy guy today?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Yeah, something's not right. Dr. Carter feels it, too." She paused. "Be careful, Josh, and call me if you need anything." My apartment was small, a one-bedroom with a fold-out couch and a half-dead fern, but it was warm, quiet, safe. I laid out a blanket for Abby by the window, and she curled up without hesitation. It was the first time I saw her sleep soundly. No twitching paws, no restless pacing, just peace. I sat on the floor beside her and whispered, "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you again." I don't know what woke me, a sound maybe, or just that sixth sense that something's wrong. I opened my eyes to darkness, the digital clock reading 3:17. I yimming. Abby was standing by the door, hackles raised, a low rumble in her chest. It wasn't quite a growl, but something deeper, more primal. Then I heard it. The soft scrape of metal on metal. Someone was trying to pick the lock. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered our situation. Then I took Abby into the bathroom, locked the door, and waited. The next few minutes stretched like hours, every sound magnified in the darkness. When the police arrived, whoever had been at my door was gone. They found scratch marks around the lock and footprints in the soft ground below my window. "You got any enemies, Mr. Sullivan?" the officer asked, shining his flashlight over the marks. "Not until recently," I said. Abby pressed against my leg. By morning, I knew we couldn't stay. I packed a bag while Abby watched from the doorway, alert and ready. I didn't call Dr. Carter, didn't want to drag him into this any further. Instead, I did the one thing I'd sworn I'd never do. I called my brother. Ethan and I hadn't spoken since Dad's funeral 3 years ago. The fight had been brutal, words like weapons, old wounds ripped open. But Ethan worked for an animal welfare organization now. He investigated abuse cases, had connections I didn't. If anyone could help make sense of this, it was him. The phone rang 5 times before he answered. "It's been a while," he said, his voice neither warm nor cold. "I need your help," I replied, skipping any pretense of small talk. "It's about a dog." There was a long pause. "You still at that clinic in Madison County?" "Yeah. I can be there in 4 hours. Don't tell anyone I'm coming." I spent those 4 hours at a coffee shop 2 towns over, Abby under the table, watching the door. When Ethan finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the shaggy hair and careless posture. He looked older, more serious, with close-cropped hair and glasses that made him look like our father. He sat down without a greeting, eyes immediately going to Abby. "That her?" he asked. I nodded. "Tell me everything." I did. The strangeness of her arrival, the device in her mouth, her behavior, the man who came looking. As I spoke, I watched Ethan's expression harden. "You still have it? The device?" "At the clinic, locked up." He nodded. "We need to get it, now." But when we arrived at Oak Ridge, we knew immediately something was wrong. The back door was ajar, the lock smashed. Inside, the place had been torn apart. Drawers emptied, files scattered. The cabinet where we'd stored the chip forced open. The chip was gone. Dr. Carter arrived 10 minutes later, face ashen when he saw the damage. "They knew where to look," he said quietly. "Who do we call?" I asked. "The police?" Ethan suggested. Dr. Carter shook his head. "They wouldn't understand." We reviewed the security footage. A single figure, masked and gloved, had broken in around 2:15 IEM. They moved with purpose, bypassing everything else and heading straight for the cabinet. In less than 2 minutes, they were gone. The strange thing, Abby didn't bark. She was in her crate near the front, but she never made a sound. She just watched. That same day, a letter arrived in an unmarked envelope. No return address, just one line written on plain paper. "She belongs to us. Don't interfere again." We reported the break-in as vandalism, but neither of us mentioned the chip. We both knew the truth wouldn't help. It would just invite more attention. "You need to get out of town," Ethan said as we stood in the wrecked office. "Both of you. I have a place you can stay, a cabin north of here. No one knows about it." "What about Dr. Carter, Sari? If these people are dangerous—" "I'll watch out for 'em," Ethan promised. "But right now, you and that dog are the targets. We need to figure out what's going on, and we can't do that if you're looking over your shoulder every minute." I looked at Abby, who sat quietly amid the chaos, her eyes never leaving my face. She trusted me to make the right decision. "Okay," I said. "We'll go, but I want answers, Ethan. Real ones." "So do I," he replied, and for the first time in years I felt like we were on the same side again. The drive up to Ethan's cabin was uneventful, but Abby didn't settle until we passed the city limits. She sat up straighter, ears perked, like she could feel the distance growing between her and whatever haunted her. When we arrived, she jumped out of the truck and sniffed the air like it was the first time she could breathe freely. The cabin was simple: 2 rooms, a wood stove, and a deck that overlooked a lake. I lit a fire, set out some food, and watched as Abby explored the cabin's corners. She seemed more curious than cautious now, like she was rebuilding trust, one step at a time. That night we sat by the lake. The water was still, reflecting the moon like glass. Abby lay beside me, her head resting on my knee. For the first time since I met her, I heard her sigh. Not a whimper or a growl, just a long, peaceful sigh. And then out of nowhere she barked, just once, loud and sharp. I looked around, startled. Nothing moved. No animals, no lights, no sounds but the crickets. "Hey!" I whispered. "What is it?" She didn't bark again, but her body was stiff, eyes trained on the tree line. I stood, heart racing. "Is someone there?" No answer, no movement, but Abby didn't lie back down. I stayed up most of the night, one hand on the flashlight and the other resting on her back. She never barked again, but she never took her eyes off the dark woods. In the morning I found footprints, fresh, human, leading up to the edge of the deck, then back into the trees. My first instinct was to run. But where would we go? Instead, I called Ethan. "Someone found us," I said. "That's impossible. No one knows about that place." "Well, someone does. There are footprints all around the cabin." A long pause. "Get back in the truck. Head northeast, away from the main roads. There's a diner in Millfield, just past the old sawmill. I'll meet you there." "What about Abby? I can't just leave her in the truck." "Bring her. We're past caring what people think." The diner was one of those places where everything came with a side of hash browns, and the coffee tasted like it had been sitting in the pot since the Nixon administration. Ethan was waiting in a corner booth, a laptop open in front of him. Sarah sat beside him, which surprised me. "What are you doing here?" I asked her. "She insisted," Ethan said before she could answer. "Said she wasn't going to sit around waiting while you played hero." Sarah rolled her eyes. "What he means is, I know more about Abby's medical history than either of you, and I've been doing some digging on my own." I slid into the booth, Abby settling under the table at my feet. "What kind of digging?" "The kind that might get us all fired," she said, pushing a folder toward me. "Dr. Carter's been acting strange since that man came in, lacking his office, making calls in private. I was worried, so I went through some of his old files." "You did what?" I couldn't believe Sarah, rule-following, by-the-book Sarah, would do something like that. "Open it," she said. Inside were photocopies of veterinary records from 5 years back, all for German Shepherds, all with nearly identical abnormalities. "These are all from the same area, the field where Abby was found," Sarah explained. "And look at the owners' addresses. They all trace back to a P.O. box in Burton." "What does this mean?" I asked, though I was starting to fear I knew. Ethan took over. "It means Dr. Carter's seen this before. These dogs all showed signs of being used for experiments. Unusual wear on teeth, unexplained surgeries, behavioral issues. And they all disappeared after a few months. No follow-up appointments, no record of what happened to them. But Dr. Carter wouldn't—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Wouldn't what?" "Wouldn't stay silent if he suspected animal abuse. Wouldn't keep records of suspicious cases. I wanted to believe that, but the evidence was right in front of me." "Maybe he didn't have a choice," Sarah said softly. "Or maybe he was trying to gather evidence, like we are now." "There's more," Ethan said, turning his laptop toward me. "I did some checking on that property. The Miller farmhouse? It was purchased 3 years ago by a shell company that traces back to the Humane Tomorrow Foundation. The Animal Welfare Group? I knew them. Everyone did. They ran those heart-wrenching TV ads about animal abuse, lobbied for stricter laws against cruelty, ran shelters across the country. They're legitimate in most ways," Ethan explained, "but there's a research division that keeps a low profile. They test behavioral modification techniques, training methods, rehabilitation programs for aggressive dogs." "That's not illegal," Sarah pointed out. "No, but it would be if some of those techniques involved surgical implants, forced medication, or extreme stress tests." Ethan closed his laptop. "I've been hearing rumors for years, but could never get proof. No one could. They're too careful, too well connected." "So what's the plan?" I asked. "First, we need to find out exactly what Dr. Carter knows. Then we locate whatever records the Foundation keeps on their test subjects. And finally, we make it all public in a way they can't bury." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch was unexpected warm. "Are you sure about this, Josh? These people aren't playing around. They've already broken into the clinic, stalked you to the cabin. What's next?" I looked down at Abby, who gazed back at me with complete trust. "I'm sure." That afternoon we returned to Oak Ridge. Dr. Carter was with a patient, but his face went pale when he saw the 3 of us walk in together. He finished quickly and motioned us into his office. "You shouldn't be here," he said, closing the door. "None of you." "We know about the other dogs," I said, cutting straight to the point. "The ones from the same area as Abby, the ones with the same injuries." And Carter sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. "You don't understand." "Then help us understand," Sarah urged. "We're on your side." He shook his head. "There are no sides here. Just people trying to do what they think is right, and others caught in the middle." "What does that mean?" Ethan pressed. Very carefully looked at each of us in turn, then at Abby, who sat quietly by my side. "It means I've been watching these people for years, documenting what they do, trying to find enough evidence to stop them without putting myself or this clinic at risk. The Humane Tomorrow Foundation? I asked. A nod. Not the whole organization, just a small group within it. They believe they're working toward a greater good, developing methods to rehabilitate dogs that would otherwise be euthanized. Dangerous dogs, fighting dogs, those with severe behavioral issues. And does that justify what they did to Abby? Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. Of course not, but they don't see it that way. To them, these dogs are already lost causes. The experiments give them purpose, even if that purpose is... He trailed off. To suffer? Ethan finished for him. What do they want with her now? I asked. Why come looking after she escaped? Dr. Carter's gaze fell to the floor. Because she didn't just escape, she succeeded where the others failed. Whatever they were trying to accomplish with her, it worked. And now they want to understand why. A chill ran through me. I thought of the way Abby had barked at the cabin. Just once, focused and deliberate. The way she watched the woods. The way she'd known the man who came for her wasn't to be trusted. How many others? Ethan asked. At least a dozen that I know of, maybe more. And you've been keeping records? Rutgers nodded. Everything's on a drive locked in my home safe. Times, dates, descriptions, photos when I could get them. It's not enough for criminal charges, but it might be enough to expose them, force an investigation. We need that drive, Ethan said. And we need to understand exactly what they did to Abby, Sarah added, and why they're so desperate to get her back. Dr. Carter hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a key. My address is 1478 Oakwood Lane. The safe is behind the painting in my study. The combination is my late wife's birthday, August 17, 1958. You not coming with us? I asked. I can't if they're watching, and they almost certainly are. They'll be watching me closest of all. You three have a better chance without me. He looked at Abby again, his expression softening. Take care of her, Josh. She's been through more than we can imagine. We left through the back door, piling into Ethan's SUV. Sarah sat in the back with Abby, who seemed to sense the tension and remained unnaturally still. Dr. Carter's home wasn't far, a modest single story in a quiet neighborhood, where most of the residents had long since retired. Ethan circled the block twice before pulling into the driveway. Doesn't look like anyone's watching, but let's be quick. The house was neat, almost obsessively so, everything labeled, organized, in its place. The study was just off the main hallway, walls lined with medical textbooks and framed photographs of Dr. Carter with various animals. The painting hiding the safe was easy to spot, an oil landscape of mountains that looked out of place among the veterinary certificates and family photos. The safe opened smoothly with the combination. Inside was a single external hard drive, a folded piece of paper, and a small silver key. What's the key for? Sarah asked. I don't know, I admitted, pocketing it along with the drive. Let's get out of here first. Read the note somewhere safer. We were halfway to the door when Abby froze, a low growl building in her throat. She was staring at the front window, where the curtain moved slightly, though there was no breeze. Someone's outside, Ethan whispered, drawing us back toward the kitchen. Back door, now. We slipped out silently, keeping low, and crept around to the side of the house where the neighbor's hedge provided cover. A figure in dark clothing was peering through Dr. Carter's front window, hand moving toward the doorknob. Police? Sarah breathed. Ethan shook his head. No badge, no uniform. That's not police. We made it back to the SUV undetected and drove in tense silence until we were well out of the neighborhood. Only then did I unfold the note Dr. Carter had left in the safe. If you're reading this, it began. Then you've taken the step I never had the courage to take. The drive contains everything I know about the Humane Tomorrow Foundation's Behavioral Modification Program. The key opens a storage unit at Lakeview Self-Storage, Unit 23B. Inside are 3 of their former test subjects that I managed to rescue and rehabilitate. They can't go to regular homes, too many issues, too much risk, but they deserve better than what was planned for them. The unit is paid through the end of the year. Find them somewhere safe. He's been rescuing dogs from them? Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. And hiding them, Ethan added. No wonder he was so careful. If they found out... I thought of Dr. Carter, alone in that house with people watching, people who wouldn't hesitate to break into the clinic or follow me to a remote cabin. We need to warn him, I said. Already texting him, Sarah replied, fingers flying over her phone. After a moment she looked up. No response. Try calling the clinic, Ethan suggested. She did. The receptionist says he never came back after we left. A knot formed in my stomach. Drive back. Now. Dr. Carter's house looked exactly as we had left it, but his car was in the driveway now. The front door was closed, no lights visible inside. We approached slowly, Abby at my side, tense and watchful. I knocked. No answer. Dr. Carter, it's Josh. Are you there? Nothing. Ethan tried the door. It was unlocked. We stepped inside cautiously, calling again. The house was still, silent, exactly as it had been before, except for the faint smell of something burning. Not wood or paper, but something chemical. Sharp. Check the study, I told Sarah, while Ethan moved toward the kitchen. I took the hallway leading to the bedrooms, Abby right behind me. The master bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open to find Dr. Carter lying on the bed, eyes closed, an empty pill bottle on the nightstand beside him. A note lay next to it, the handwriting shaky but legible. I can't do this anymore. Forgive me. Make it count. Ethan, Sarah, I shouted, rushing to Dr. Carter's side. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow. Call 911. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but I knew from their faces it was too late. Whatever Dr. Carter had taken, he'd taken enough to ensure he wouldn't wake up. As they loaded him into the ambulance, a police officer pulled me aside for questions. Did he seem depressed lately? Any signs he was thinking about this? I shook my head, numb with shock. No. He was worried about something, but not this. Another officer emerged from the house, holding up a plastic evidence bag containing a small object. Found this in the bathroom trash. Looks like it was partially burned. Inside the bag was what remained of an external hard drive, identical to the one we'd taken from the safe. A decoy, Ethan muttered in my ear. He knew they'd come looking. As the police continued their investigation, we stood in the driveway, the weight of what had happened settling over us. Dr. Carter was gone, driven to take his own life rather than face whatever threat had been hanging over him, and now we held what he'd died protecting, evidence that could expose the Humane Tomorrow Foundation's darkest secret. We need to see what's on that drive, Sarah said quietly. Not here, Ethan replied. We go to the storage unit first, secure those dogs, then find somewhere safe to review the files. The Lakeview Self-Storage Facility was on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of identical metal units with faded orange doors. Unit 23B was at the far end, away from the office and security cameras. The key slipped into the padlock easily, the door rolling up with a rusty groan. Inside were 3 large crates, each containing a German shepherd. They watched us warily. No barking, no growling, just the same eerie silence that had surrounded Abby when she first arrived at the clinic. Beside each crate was a folder containing medical records, training logs, and behavioral notes in Dr. Carter's meticulous handwriting. He was rehabilitating them, Sarah said, skimming one of the folders, weaning them off whatever medications they were on, trying to undo the conditioning they'd been subjected to. The dogs themselves looked healthy but guarded. One had a scar similar to Abby's, a small line on the roof of its mouth where something had once been embedded. "We can't leave 'em here," I said. "My family has a farm an hour north," Sarah offered. "Plenty of space, no neighbors for miles. My parents are in Florida for the winter." "It's risky moving them all at once," Ethan cautioned. "More risky than leaving them here for someone to find," I countered. "Dr. Carter died to protect these dogs and the information about what was done to them. We're not giving up now." It took some coaxing, but we managed to load all 3 dogs into Ethan's SUV alongside Abby. They were tense around each other at first, but not aggressive. Almost like they recognized something familiar in one another. The drive to Sarah's family farm was tense, every pair of headlights in the rear view mirror causing my heart to race. But we arrived without incident, the old farmhouse standing quiet and dark against the night sky. "My mom used to rescue greyhounds when I was growing up," Sarah explained as she led us to a large converted barn behind the house. "It's still set up with kennels, runs, everything we need." The space was perfect, clean, spacious, with both indoor and outdoor access for the dogs. They settled in quickly, accepting water and food with the same cautious reserve Abby had shown at first. In the farmhouse kitchen, Ethan set up his laptop and connected Dr. Carter's hard drive. The files were meticulously organized: dates, locations, detailed logs of dogs that had come through his clinic with suspicious injuries or behaviors. Photos, some grainy as if taken in secret, showed the burned-out Miller farmhouse when it was still standing. People in lab coats moving crates from vans to the building. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a document titled Project Hazel Overview. "It's an internal foundation document. Must have been leaked to Dr. Carter somehow." The file outlined a research program focused on developing non-lethal methods for controlling aggressive canine behavior through targeted neurological intervention. In simpler terms, they were trying to create a way to make dangerous dogs safe without euthanizing them. A noble goal on paper, but the methods described were anything but humane. Surgical implantation of control devices, medication trials without proper oversight, aversion therapy using electric stimuli. Ethan read aloud, his voice growing harder with each item. "This isn't research, it's torture." "But why?" I asked. "The foundation has millions in funding, state-of-the-art facilities. Why conduct these experiments in secret, in places like that farmhouse?" "Because what they're doing is illegal," Ethan said, "and because they know the public wouldn't stand for it, no matter how they tried to justify it." Sarah was reading through another file. "According to this, Abby was part of their 3rd trial group. She's listed as Subject 7 of only 2 in her group to survive the initial implantation procedure." My stomach turned. I looked over at Abby, who lay quietly by the door, watching us with those intelligent eyes. What had she endured before finding her way to us? "There's a name here," Sarah continued. "The project director, Dr. Raymond Keller." "That's our next step," Ethan said. "We find Keller, confront him with what we know, force him to go on record about what they've been doing." "And if he refuses?" I asked. "Then we go public with everything we have. Dr. Carter died making sure we could tell this story. We owe it to him and to these dogs. To finish what he started." As the night deepened, we took turns watching the road leading to the farm, scanning Dr. Carter's files and checking on the dogs. It was near dawn when I stepped onto the porch for some air, Abby at my side. She seemed more at ease now, surrounded by others like her, freed from whatever haunted her. I thought of Dr. Carter, of the guilt he must have carried, knowing what was happening but unable to stop it directly. How many other vets, trainers, and shelter workers were caught in the same position? How many had turned a blind eye, or worse, actively participated? The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky when Sarah joined me, a cup of coffee in each hand. She passed one to me and leaned against the railing. "My mother called," she said. "I told her what's happening, not everything, but enough. She says we can use the farm as long as we need, but she's worried. Says we should go to the police." Would they believe us? A story about a respected animal welfare organization secretly torturing dogs for research? Probably not without more proof. She sipped her coffee, watching Abby explore the dewy grass. She's different this morning, more dog-like. She was right. Abby was sniffing fence posts, pawing at interesting spots, her tail held higher than I'd ever seen it. Surrounded by the other rescued shepherds in a space where she felt secure, something was awakening in her. Something that had been suppressed. "We're gonna win this," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "For them, for Dr. Carter." Sarah's hand found mine on the railing, her fingers warm against my skin. "I know we will." The morning after Dr. Carter's death, his suicide made the local paper. A small article, tucked between ads for farm equipment and announcements about the upcoming county fair. "Respected local veterinarian dies at home," the headline read. No mention of the circumstances, no hint at the darkness that had driven him to such an end. Just another quiet tragedy in a small town. We gathered around Sarah's kitchen table, the morning light casting long shadows across Dr. Carter's files spread out before us. The 3 rescued German shepherds were settling into the barn, gradually adjusting to their new surroundings. Abby stayed close to me, more animated than I'd ever seen her, as if being around others of her kind had awakened something long dormant. "We need a plan," Ethan said, his voice rough from a night with little sleep. "The Foundation will be looking for these dogs for the evidence. It won't take them long to connect the dots to Sarah's farm." "We go public," Sarah suggested. "Take everything to the media. Once the story's out there, it's harder for them to come after us." "No," Ethan shook his head. "They've got too much public goodwill, too many connections. They'd spin it as the desperate allegations of a mentally unstable vet who took his own life, and 3 misguided kids who got caught up in his delusions." I studied the file on Abby, Subject 7 in their cold terminology, the detailed notes on her progress, the clinical descriptions of her pain, the medications they'd used. My anger built with every page, hardening into resolve. "We need to confront Keller directly," I said. "Get him on record, maybe even get him to admit what they've done." "That's insane," Sarah protested. "He'd never talk to us, and even if he did, he'd never admit anything." "Maybe not willingly," Ethan mused, "but if we could record him when he doesn't know he's being recorded." "That's illegal in this state without both parties' consent," Sarah pointed out. "So is what they did to these dogs," I countered. "Sometimes you have to break the small rules to enforce the big ones." We developed our plan over the next several hours. The Foundation was holding a fundraising gala that weekend at the Grand Hotel downtown, a black tie affair with tickets starting at $500 0 cents a plate. Ethan had a contact who could get us service staff credentials. We'd go in, find Keller, and create a situation where he might reveal something incriminating. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. While Ethan made calls to arrange our access, Sarah and I drove to Dr. Carter's funeral. The small chapel was surprisingly crowded. Clients, colleagues, community members who'd known him for decades. We stood at the back, not wanting to draw attention to ourselves, listening as people shared stories of his kindness, his dedication, his gentle way with animals. "No one knew," Sarah whispered. "No one had any idea what he was carrying." The service ended and people filed out into the bright afternoon sunshine. As we turned to leave, I spotted a familiar face. Rick Bannister, the animal control officer who had brought Abby to the clinic that first day. He caught my eye and nodded slightly, then walked around the side of the building, clearly expecting us to follow. "That's the officer who found Abby," I told Sarah. "Let's hear what he has to say." Rick was leaning against the chapel wall, smoking a cigarette. He straightened as we approached. "Heard you been asking questions about that shepherd," he said without preamble, "and now Dr. Carter's dead. Do you know something about this?" I asked, cutting right to the chase. He took a long drag, then exhaled slowly. I know that dog didn't just wander into that field by chance. And I know the Miller property wasn't just some abandoned farmhouse. Tell us what you know, Sarah urged. Rick glanced around, ensuring we were alone. I worked security for the Foundation a few years back. Just weekend shifts, nothing special. But I saw things. Dogs coming in healthy, leaving different. When I asked questions, they let me go. Said they were downsizing. My pulse quickened. Why didn't you report what you saw? To who? He laughed bitterly. The Foundation's got half the town council in their pocket, makes big donations to the Police Benevolent Fund every year. Nobody wanted to hear it. So you've just been watching? Sarah's voice held an accusatory edge. No. Rick's expression hardened. I've been doing what I can. Where do you think those other 3 dogs came from? The ones Dr. Carter was hiding. The realization hit me like a physical blow. You've been rescuing them. He nodded. When I can. When it's safe. That German shepherd, Abby, she wasn't supposed to come to the clinic. I was taking her somewhere else, but she was in bad shape, needed medical attention fast. Why tell us this now? Sarah asked. Because you're making waves, and that's going to get you killed if you're not careful. These people, they believe in what they're doing, think they're saving dogs that would otherwise be put down, making them safe for adoption. By torturing them? I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. By whatever means necessary, Rick corrected. That's how they see it. The ends justify the means. We're going to stop them, I said. Rick studied me for a long moment. Maybe you will, but be smart about it. Dr. Carter wasn't the only one keeping records. He handed me a small USB drive. This has security footage from inside their research facility. The real one, not those satellite locations like the Miller place. I've been collecting it for months. I stared at the tiny device. Why give this to us? Why not take it to the authorities yourself? Because I've got kids, a mortgage, I can't risk being the whistleblower. But I can help you blow the whistle. He dropped his cigarette, crushing it under his boot. Be careful who you trust, and watch your backs. The drive Rick had gave us contained hours of footage. Clinical rooms where dogs were strapped to tables, procedures performed without apparent anesthesia, training sessions using methods that could only be described as abuse. Most damning of all were clips of Keller himself supervising some of the worst procedures, dismissing concerns raised by his staff, authorizing disposal of dogs that failed to respond to treatment. This is it, Ethan said, his voice tight with emotion. This is what we needed. So, we skip the gala? Sarah asked. Go straight to the media with this? No. I thought of Dr. Carter, of the risks he'd taken, the price he'd paid. We still confront Keller, but now we do it with leverage. The night of the gala arrived, the Grand Hotel transformed into a showcase of wealth and philanthropic excess. Celebrities mingled with local politicians, everyone united in their public commitment to animal welfare. The irony was sickening. Our service staff credentials got us in easily. Sarah and I worked as servers while Ethan monitored from the kitchen, coordinating our movements through earpieces borrowed from his animal welfare organization. Keller's at table 6, Ethan's voice crackled in my ear. Blue suit, silver tie. He's got 2 security types with him, so be careful. I spotted him immediately. A distinguished man in his 50s, silver-hailed and tanned, laughing with a group of admirers. It was hard to reconcile his polished appearance with the man who had authorized such cruelty. Moving in, I murmured, picking up a tray of champagne flutes. Sarah positioned herself on the other side of the room, ready to create a distraction if needed. I served drinks to Keller's table, careful to keep my face neutral, my movements efficient. He barely glanced at me, too engaged in his conversation about the Foundation's newest initiative, a campaign against dogfighting rings. The physical trauma these animals endure is nothing compared to the psychological damage, he was saying. Our rehabilitation protocols are showing unprecedented success rates, even with the most aggressive cases. I felt bile rise in my throat, but maintained my composure. I needed him alone, away from witnesses. My opportunity came during the dessert course when Keller excused himself, heading toward the restrooms in the back corridor. I followed, waiting until he was inside before positioning myself by the door. When he emerged, I stepped forward. "Dr. Keller? Could I have a word?" He frowned, taking in my server's uniform with confusion. "Do I know you?" "No, but you know my dog, or should I say, Subject 7. His expression froze, then quickly rearranged itself into practiced concern. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "We have the footage, Dr. Keller," I said quietly, "from your actual research facility, not just the satellite locations like the Miller farmhouse. We know what you've been doing to those dogs." He stared at me, calculating. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Why don't we discuss this somewhere more private?" He led me to a small conference room off the main hallway, locking the door behind us. I felt a flicker of unease, but reminded myself that Ethan and Sarah knew exactly where I was. "You must be Josh Sullivan," Keller said, his tone conversational. "The vet tech who's been causing so much trouble. I wondered when you'd make your move. You've been watching me? Of course, you took something that didn't belong to you, something very valuable." "Abby isn't a thing," I snapped. "She's a living being that you tortured." Keller sighed, as if disappointed by my lack of understanding. "Subject 7, Abby, as you call her, was part of a research program that will save thousands of dogs from euthanasia. Do you have any idea how many animals are destroyed each year because of behavioral issues? Issues we can fix by surgically implanting control devices, by using drugs and fear conditioning. That's not fixing, that's breaking. It's necessary progress." He straightened his tie, completely at ease. "Every medical advancement in history has required sacrifice. The benefits outweigh the costs. Tell that to Dr. Carter, tell that to Abby and the others who suffered for your greater good." Keller's expression hardened. Carter was weak. He understood the importance of our work, but couldn't stomach the methods. As for the dogs, they were already slated for euthanasia. We gave them purpose. I pulled out my phone, showing him that I was recording. "Care to repeat that for the record?" Instead of reacting with anger or surprise, Keller laughed. "Record all you want. It won't matter. The Foundation has the best lawyers in the country. We have supporters in government, in law enforcement, in the media. One recording from a disgruntled employee won't change that." "Former employee," a voice said from the doorway. Sarah stood there, a master key card in her hand, her phone also recording. "And it's not just one recording." Keller's composure slipped for the first time. "What are you talking about?" "She means we have everything," Ethan said, stepping into the room behind Sarah. "The security footage, the internal documents, the medical records, the testimony from former staff, all being uploaded to servers across the country as we speak, scheduled for release to every major news outlet tomorrow morning." "That's impossible," Keller sputtered. "Those files are secure. The system is closed." "Not as secure as you thought," Ethan replied coldly. "You're finished, Keller. The Foundation, the research, all of it." Keller lunged for Ethan's throat with unexpected speed, his cultured veneer cracking completely. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Years of research, millions in funding?" Security guards, drawn by the commotion, burst into the room, pulling Keller away. In the confusion, the recording of our conversation was playing loudly from Sarah's phone, his damning words echoing in the small space. "These people are trespassing," Keller shouted. "Arrest them." One of the guards, however, was listening to the recording with increasing horror. "Sir, I think you need to come with us." As they led Keller away, still protesting, still threatening, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. It had been too easy, somehow. After everything we'd been through, everything Dr. Carter had sacrificed, I'd expected more. "Is it really over?" I asked Ethan as we watched Keller being escorted from the building. "Not even close," he replied grimly. "This is just the beginning. The Foundation has deep pockets and deeper connections. They'll fight back, hard." "But we have the evidence," Sarah pointed out. "Evidence can disappear. Witnesses can be discredited." Ethan looked at us both. "We need to get back to the farm, secure the dogs. Now!" We left the gala through a service entrance, hurrying to Ethan's SUV in the back parking lot. The night air felt charged with tension, as if a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. "Something's wrong," Sarah said as we approached the vehicle. "The alarm light isn't blinking." Ethan slowed, pulling us back into the shadows. "Someone's tampered with it." Before we could retreat further, headlights blazed to life around us, 3, 4, 5 sets, surrounding the SUV, pinning us in place. Car doors opened and figures emerged, moving with military precision. "Police! Don't move!" a voice commanded through a megaphone. "Joshua Sullivan, Sarah Mitchell, Ethan Sullivan, you are under arrest for breaking and entering, theft of private property, and interfering with a federally funded research program." "This is insane," Sarah whispered. "They can't do this." But they could, and they were. As officers approached, handcuffs ready, I realized just how powerful our enemies truly were. Keller's confidence hadn't been misplaced after all. "What about the dogs?" I asked Ethan as cold metal closed around my wrists. "What about Abby?" "Hope Rick was telling the truth about having others on his side," Ethan muttered back, "because right now they're on their own." The last thing I saw before being placed in the back of a police cruiser was a familiar white pickup turning into the hotel parking lot. Rick Bannister sat behind the wheel, his expression grim as he watched us being taken away. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me the slightest of nods. The county jail smelled of bleach and despair, a potent mixture that clung to my clothes and skin during the endless hours I spent in a holding cell. They'd separated us, me and general population, Sarah in the women's section, and Ethan in a different facility altogether. Divide and conquer. Classic strategy. My one phone call went to a public defender who looked overwhelmed before I even finished explaining the situation. "Breaking and entering, theft of research materials, criminal trespassing, interference with a federally funded program," he read from the charge sheet, each item dropping like a stone. "Mr. Sullivan, these are serious allegations." "They're trumped up," I insisted. "We have evidence of animal abuse, illegal experimentation." "Evidence that was obtained illegally," he interrupted, "which makes it inadmissible in court." "What about Dr. Carter's files?" "Those were given to us legally." The lawyer's expression softened slightly. "I'll look into it, but for now, you're staying here. Bail hearing isn't until Monday." It was Friday night, 3 days in a cell, while Abby and the other dogs sat unprotected at Sarah's farm. 3 days for the Foundation to cover their tracks, destroy evidence, silence witnesses. The weekend crawled by in a haze of bad food, fluorescent lighting, and constant noise. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely think past the gnawing worry about what was happening outside these walls. Sunday afternoon, a guard informed me I had a visitor. I expected the public defender. Instead, I found my mother waiting in the visitation room, her face lined with worry and something else. Disappointment, maybe. We hadn't spoken in months, not since our last argument about my wasting my potential at the clinic instead of going back to vet school. "Joshua," she said, her voice soft but steady, "what have you gotten yourself into?" I told her everything about Abby, the device in her mouth, the Carter suicide, the evidence we'd gathered. As I spoke, her expression shifted from skepticism to horror to resolve. I know you think I abandoned my dreams, I finished. But this, protecting these animals, this matters more than any degree. She reached across the table, her small hand covering mine. Your father would be proud of you. He always said you had his stubborn sense of justice. You're not mad. I'm terrified, she corrected, but also proud. And I'm not without resources. She lowered her voice. I've been speaking with Sarah's parents. They flew back from Florida yesterday. They're at the farm now with the dogs. Relief flooded through me. They're safe? For now, but there's more. She hesitated. There was a fire at Dr. Carter's house last night. Officials are calling it arson. All his records, everything he kept there, gone. My stomach dropped. And the clinic? Broken into again. The place was ransacked. They were erasing every trace, systematically destroying anything that could corroborate our claims. Without Dr. Carter's testimony, without his meticulous documentation, our case was unraveling, thread by thread. There's something else, my mother continued, her voice barely audible now. About your brother. A cold dread settled over me. What about Ethan? He was released yesterday, no charges filed. That's good, right? She shook her head slightly. He was seen going into the Foundation headquarters this morning, voluntarily. The words hit like physical blows. Ethan released when we weren't. Ethan walking into the enemy's stronghold of his own free will. Ethan, who had always known more about the Foundation than he should have. He wouldn't betray us, I said, but doubt had already taken root. He wouldn't. I don't know what to believe anymore, my mother admitted. But I know this. You need a real lawyer, not that overworked public defender. I've mortgaged the house. It's not much, but it should be enough to get you proper representation. Mom, no. It's done, she said firmly. I failed you once when you needed support after dropping out. I won't fail you again. Dr. Carter's funeral was held the following day. I watched the live stream from a communal TV in the jail's recreation area, surrounded by inmates who had no idea why I stared so intently at a stranger's memorial service. The turnout was even larger than the visitation had been. The entire town seemed to have come to pay their respects. The camera panned across familiar faces, clinic staff, clients, community members, and then I saw him. Ethan, standing at the back of the church, looking somber in a dark suit. Beside him was Keller, his hand resting on my brother's shoulder in what looked like a gesture of comfort, but felt like a claim of ownership. My hands curled into fists. That night, unable to sleep, I paced my cell, trying to make sense of Ethan's apparent betrayal. Had he been working with the Foundation all along? Was everything, his help, his support, his righteous anger, just an act? Or had they gotten to him somehow, used leverage I couldn't begin to understand? The bail hearing on Monday brought no relief. The judge, a stern-faced woman with connections to the Foundation's board, as my mother's hastily hired attorney pointed out, denied bail, citing the seriousness of the charges and the risk that we might interfere with an ongoing federal investigation. What investigation? I demanded, earning a sharp rebuke from the judge. They're the ones who should be investigated. Back in the holding cell, the attorney outlined our options, none of them good. The Foundation is pushing for maximum charges. They're claiming you stole proprietary research, interfered with legitimate animal behavior studies, and defamed their organization. What about the evidence, the videos, the documents? Everything on those drives is being reviewed, but much of it could be ruled inadmissible due to how it was obtained, and without Dr. Carter's testimony. The unspoken message was clear. We were fighting a losing battle against an opponent with vastly more resources and influence. That afternoon, Sarah was allowed to join me in the attorney's meeting room. She looked exhausted, her usually neat hair tangled, dark circles under her eyes. But her spirit remained unbroken. "My parents say the farm's being watched," she reported. "Black SUVs parked on the road, men with cameras. They're afraid to let the dogs outside." "Have they seen Ethan?" Her expression clouded. "No, and he's not answering calls. Josh, do you think he's really working with him?" I wanted to deny it to defend my brother, but the evidence was mounting. "I don't know, but right now we need to focus on the dogs. If the Foundation gets them back—" "They won't," Sarah said with surprising fierceness. "My dad's a stubborn old farmer with a shotgun and a deep distrust of government. Those dogs aren't going anywhere." Despite everything, I smiled. There was comfort in knowing that Abby and the others had protectors. But it wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the Foundation would find a legal way to reclaim their property, and when that happened, the dogs would disappear into a system designed to hide them forever. As the guard came to take us back to our cells, Sarah squeezed my hand. "We can't give up. Dr. Cardine didn't die for nothing." "No," I agreed, though hope felt increasingly distant. "He didn't." But that night, alone on my thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, I confronted the terrible truth. We were losing. And without some kind of miracle, Abby and everything she represented, the fight against cruelty, the demand for accountability, the promise I'd made to protect her, would be lost too. The morning of our 5th day in custody, the guards came for me earlier than usual. No explanation, just, "Sullivan, you've got visitors." I expected my mother or perhaps our attorney with more bad news. Instead, I was led to a conference room where Ethan sat waiting, his expression unreadable. "You've got 15 minutes, the guard said before closing the door. I remained standing, unwilling to sit across from the brother who had apparently sold us out. "I didn't expect to see you here. Figured you'd be too busy with your new friends at the Foundation." Ethan didn't flinch at the accusation. "You don't understand what's happening." "I understand perfectly. You betrayed us. After everything, Dr. Carter, Abby, the evidence, you walked right into Keller's office like you were old friends." "I did what I had to do," he said quietly, "to save you." I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call this? Saving me?" "Yes." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Listen carefully. When I was released, Keller approached me with a deal. They'd drop all charges against you and Sarah if I turned over all copies of the evidence and signed a non-disclosure agreement. And you agreed, after everything we've seen." I agreed to meet with him. Ethan's eyes held mine. "To buy time." "Time for what?" He slid a newspaper across the table. "Read it." It was that morning's edition of the county paper. The headline made my heart stop. "Whistleblower exposes animal cruelty at respected foundation." Below it was a photo of Rick Bannister standing on the steps of the state capitol, surrounded by reporters. "That's not all," Ethan continued. "Turn to page 3. I flipped through the paper with trembling hands. There, taking up half the page, was a copy of Dr. Carter's suicide note, the full version, not the abbreviated one I'd found beside his bed. It detailed his years of documenting the Foundation's activities, the threats that kept him silent, and his final plea: let the truth come out. Let them answer for what they've done. "How?" I managed, my voice barely functioning. Rick had been working with Dr. Carter for years. They had a contingency plan. If anything happened to one of them, the other would release everything they'd gathered. When Carter died, Rick put it in motion, but needed time to compile everything safely. In my arrest, bought him that time. While everyone was focused on you and Sarah, Rick was working with a contact at the state's attorney general's office. They've been building a case against the Foundation for months. Hope, dangerous and fragile, began to stir in my chest. "So, you didn't betray us?" "No." Ethan's expression softened, but I needed Keller to believe I had. I needed access to their internal systems. Why didn't you tell me? Why let me think? Because your reaction had to be genuine. He reached across the table, gripping my shoulder. You're a terrible liar, Josh. Always have been. If you'd known, they would have seen it in your face. The door opened and the guard stepped in. Time's up. Ethan stood. One more thing. The truth about Rick. He didn't find Abby by accident. He brought her to your clinic deliberately. What? Why? Because he knew you. Knew what kind of person you were. Knew you wouldn't give up on her. Ethan smiled faintly. He chose you, Josh, and he was right. The guard escorted Ethan out, leaving me alone with the newspaper and a mind reeling from revelations. Rick had been fighting the Foundation from the inside all along. Dr. Carter had been gathering evidence for years, not just turning a blind eye. And my brother had been protecting me in the only way he could. I was returned to my cell, but something had changed. The weight of hopelessness had lifted, replaced by a cautious belief that maybe, just maybe, we might win after all. 3 hours later, an unfamiliar guard appeared at my cell door. Sullivan, pack your things. You're being released. What about Sarah Mitchell? I asked as I gathered the few possessions I had. Her too. Charges dropped by order of the DA. Outside, the autumn sunlight felt almost painfully bright after days under fluorescent lighting. Sarah was already there, standing beside our attorney, who looked as surprised as we were by this sudden development. What happened? I asked him. The district attorney received new evidence this morning that contradicts the Foundation's claims. They're withdrawing all charges against both of you, pending further investigation. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in with excitement. Did you see the news? It's everywhere, not just the local paper. National outlets are picking up the story. A car pulled up to the curb. My mother's old station wagon. She stepped out, tears streaming down her face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. Let's go home, she said. There's someone waiting to see you. The drive to Sarah's family farm took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. I stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape roll by, hardly daring to hope that Abby would still be there, still be safe. As we turned onto the long graveled driveway, I saw them. 3 police cruisers and an animal control van parked in front of the farmhouse. My heart sank. No, I whispered. They can't have taken her. Wait, my mother said, touching my arm. Look. Rick Bannister stepped out of the farmhouse, followed by a woman in a suit carrying a clipboard. Behind them, Sarah's father emerged, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile when he spotted our car. We pulled up beside the cruisers, and I was out before the engine had fully stopped. Where's Abby? Is she okay? Rick grinned. See for yourself. He whistled a short, sharp sound, and there she was, Abby bounding around the corner of the house, her coat gleaming in the sunlight, her movements fluid and free. She spotted me and froze for just a second as if disbelieving her eyes. Then she was running, a streak of tawny fur and wild joy. I fell to my knees as she reached me, her whole body wiggling with excitement, her tongue frantically licking my face as if to make sure I was real. For the first time since I had known her, she barked, not a warning, not an alarm, but a sound of pure, uncomplicated happiness. Who's this? I asked, gesturing to the woman with the clipboard once I'd managed to regain some composure. Dr. Lena Westfield, State Veterinary Board, she introduced herself. I'm here to document the condition of the animals and take official custody. Alarm shot through me. Custody? You can't take them? As evidence, she clarified quickly, and as the victim of a crime, Abby technically belongs in protective custody until the case is resolved. However, she glanced at Rick, who nodded encouragingly. Given the circumstances, we're instituting a foster arrangement. If you're willing, you would continue to care for her Under official supervision, of course. Of course, I agreed immediately, relief washing over me. What about the others? Similar arrangements are being made. These dogs will need extensive rehabilitation, the kind your Dr. Carter was providing. Her expression softened. He was a good man. I wish I'd known what he was facing. As the officials completed their documentation and prepared to leave, Rick pulled me aside. There's something else you should know. About Abby. My stomach tightened. What is it? He led me to his truck and pulled out a worn manila folder. When I was going through Carter's records, I found this. He'd been running DNA tests on the rescued dogs, trying to establish connections between them. Connections? You mean like breeding records? More than that, Rick opened the folder, pointing to a sheet of test results. He was looking for a specific dog, one that disappeared about 7 years ago. A German shepherd named Ranger. The name hit me like a physical blow. Ranger? My Ranger? Rick nodded slowly. Carter suspected the Foundation's program had been running longer than anyone realized. That they'd been taking pets, specific breeds with desired traits, from rural areas where disappearances wouldn't raise too many alarms. In Abby, I could barely form the question. Abby is Ranger's daughter, not just genetically similar, his direct offspring from one of the Foundation's early breeding programs. My legs weakened and I sank onto the truck's running board, Abby immediately pressing against me, her steady presence anchoring me as the world seemed to shift. How did Carter know? About Ranger? About me? He didn't, not at first. He was just running standard DNA profiles on the rescued dogs, looking for patterns. When Abby's results came in, he noticed markers matching another dog in his database, one reported missing years ago by the Sullivan family. I remembered then. The samples Dr. Carter had taken after Ranger disappeared, the way he'd promised to keep an eye out, to check any similar dogs that came through his practice. I'd thought it was just kindness, just protocol. I never imagined he'd kept searching all these years. That's why he fought so hard for these dogs, Rick continued. It wasn't just professional ethics, it was personal. I looked at Abby, seeing her in a new light, not just a victim I'd saved, but a connection to the beloved companion I'd lost. Had some part of me recognized her? Had some instinct drawn me to her from the beginning? Does she know? Sarah asked, joining us. Do dogs understand family that way? I don't know, I admitted, running my hand along Abby's flank. But I think there's a reason she trusted me when she wouldn't trust anyone else. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the farmyard, we gathered on the porch, my mother, Sarah, and her parents, Ethan, Rick, and the 4 German shepherds who had found their way to safety against impossible odds. The road ahead would be long, the Foundation's influence wouldn't vanish overnight, and the legal battles were just beginning. But for the first time in what felt like forever, the future held more promise than threat. Abby sat beside me, her head resting on my knee, her eyes watching the horizon like she was keeping guard. Not out of fear now, but out of love. Protecting the family she had found just as we had protected her. 6 months after our release from jail, I stood in the back of a crowded courtroom, watching as Raymond Keller was led away in handcuffs. The verdict had been unanimous. Guilty on all counts of animal cruelty, fraud, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The Foundation's legitimate work continued under new leadership, but its secretive research division had been dismantled, its facilities closed, its records open to public scrutiny. "Never thought I'd see the day," Rick murmured beside me. He'd become something of a celebrity in animal welfare circles. The whistleblower who brought down one of the country's most powerful organizations. He handled the attention with characteristic gruffness, using his platform to advocate for stronger oversight of animal research. "It wouldn't have happened without Dr. Carter," I replied, thinking of the memorial garden we'd planted at the clinic. a quiet space where clients could sit with their pets and remember the vet who had ultimately given his life to protect animals who couldn't protect themselves. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around Ethan, who had become the public face of our fight. His background in animal welfare work made him a natural spokesperson, and his quiet intensity on camera conveyed the seriousness of what we'd uncovered. Sarah stood beside him, occasionally interjecting with precise medical details about the dog's conditions and recovery. I hung back, never comfortable with the attention. My focus remained where it had always been, on the animals, particularly Abby, who waited for me in Sarah's car. The foster arrangement had become permanent once the trial concluded, though in truth there had never been any question where she would end up. "Ready to go?" Sarah asked, joining me as the crowd began to disperse. "Your mom's expecting us for dinner." "Yeah," I smiled, taking her hand. "Let's go home." The past 6 months had brought changes I could never have anticipated. Sarah and I had moved into a small house on the edge of her family's property, close enough to care for all 4 rescued shepherds, but with space of our own. My mother visited often, gradually rebuilding the relationship that had fractured when I left vet school. And Ethan had relocated his work to be closer to us, our shared experience healing the old wounds that had kept us apart for so long. But the biggest change was in myself. After years of feeling adrift, of believing I'd failed at the only thing I'd ever wanted to do, I'd found my purpose again. With encouragement from Sarah and a recommendation from Dr. Westfield, I'd reapplied to veterinary school, focusing specifically on rehabilitation for abused animals. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Rick hadn't brought Abby to our clinic that day? Sarah asked as we drove through the familiar countryside. If he'd taken her somewhere else? Sometimes, I admitted, but I think she would have found her way to me eventually. Some connections are just meant to be. At home, Abby greeted us with the enthusiastic welcome that never failed to lift my spirits. She still had her moments, sudden stillness when water ran too loudly, watchfulness when strangers approached, but they were fewer now, overshadowed by her growing confidence and joy. The other 3 shepherds had found permanent homes as well, 2 with families specifically trained to handle their special needs, and one, remarkably, with Rick himself, who claimed he just needed a good watchdog, but fooled no one with his gruff pretense of detachment. My mother was waiting on the porch when we arrived, a pitcher of lemonade and her famous apple pie set out on the small table. She'd aged visibly during my time in jail, but these past months had restored some of her vitality, her eyes bright again with purpose. "I heard the news on the radio," she said, hugging us both. "Congratulations." "It's finally over," I replied, sinking into one of the wicker chairs. Abby immediately settled at my feet, her constant shadow. "Not over," my mother corrected gently. "Just beginning. The hard part comes now, making sure it never happens again." She was right. Already animal welfare organizations across the country were pushing for stronger regulations, better oversight, more transparency and research. The case had opened eyes and changed minds, creating momentum for reforms that had stalled for years. As we sat there in the golden evening light, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. "It's from Molly Jenkins at the Rescue Network," she said, scanning the text. "They just received 5 more German shepherds from a raid on another research facility in Kentucky. They want to know if we can help evaluate them, see if they have similar histories to our 4. The request didn't surprise me. Since the case had become public, similar operations had been uncovered in other states. Smaller, less sophisticated, but cut from the same cloth. "Tell her yes," I said without hesitation. "We'll drive down this weekend." Sarah smiled, squeezing my hand. "I already did." Later that night, with Sarah asleep beside me and Abby curled at the foot of our bed, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that first moment in the exam room, when Dr. Carter's face had drained of color at what he found in Abby's mouth, to the courthouse steps today, It had been a road marked by loss and discovery, by betrayal and unexpected allies, but most of all by love. Love for animals who couldn't speak for themselves. Love for the truth, no matter how painful. Love for each other, forged in the crucible of shared purpose. In the morning I would wake early, as always, take Abby for her run along the creek, then spend hours reviewing cases and studying for my upcoming exams. Sarah would join us for breakfast before heading to the clinic, where she had stepped into a leadership role following Dr. Carter's death. Ethan would call with updates on the Kentucky case, and my mother would stop by with groceries and advice I hadn't asked for but secretly appreciated. It was a simple life, built on the ashes of something terrible, but that, I was learning, is how healing works, not by forgetting the darkness, but by bringing it into the light where it can be seen, acknowledged, and finally overcome. Outside, the moon cast silver shadows across the yard where the 3 other shepherds had once huddled, frightened and confused. Now it was just grass and trees, peaceful in the night. But the memory remained of what had been done to them, and what had been done to stop it. Abby shifted in her sleep, paused, twitching slightly as she chased something in her dreams. Not running away anymore, I like to think, but running toward something better, just as we all were, one day at a time. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.